That was great, girls. David's got me worried now. My wife said, "Don't fall off." This is the last place in the world I would have expected to find myself, trying to instruct God's people. And a nice crowd of God's people it is. I'm a newbie. Mr. Eisen gave a fitting sermon yesterday that I needed to hear, talking about stepping out of the comfort zone, and I'm with him. This is not a comfort zone. Mr. Hayward's been after me to give a sermon for several years, and I've been saying, "No thank you, Mr. Hayward," for several years. It's easy to say. He was bragging to his wife a couple of months ago about being such a good salesman that he finally got me to say, okay, that I'd give a sermon. I had to remind him it took him 4 years. So I'm not sure that's a good salesman. But I said okay this time because things are a little different. Let me explain what I mean. In April of 2012, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. And the cancer had already spread to my liver before we even got the diagnosis. I was given a year to live without treatment and a couple of years to live with treatment. My wife was with me when we got the diagnosis, the news, and as you can imagine, it was a very difficult thing to hear. I know in a group this size, there are a lot of people, or bound to be several people, that have faced similar situations. And you know what I'm talking about when I say everything changed. My life changed. The lives of my loved ones changed. My way of looking at life began to change. Facing your own imminent mortality has a way of making everything that you know, everything you believe, a whole lot more real. And it makes you kind of start to sort through the things you're not so sure of. One subject that became incredibly important, as you can imagine, is the subject of faith. Faith is a very big word. In Hebrews 11, verse 6, it says it is impossible to please God without faith. Without faith, our attempts at obedience don't please God. Our attempts at observance of these holy days won't please God. Everything we try to do without faith, absent of faith, doesn't please Him. It's impossible to please God without faith. Now, obviously, this is a huge subject, and there's no way to cover it in a short sermon, or probably if I had a week of sermons, I couldn't cover the subject. And I can't bring you any new information or anything that you haven't already heard and understood. But I would like to present the subject in a little bit of an overview, a little different perspective that maybe will get us all to think, and the pieces might fit together a little better, and maybe some of the spiritual principles that we'll discuss will be a little more real to you. Let me demonstrate what I mean when I say faith is a very big word. As I've been studying, it's been interesting to discover 4 different functions of faith in the Bible. A lot of people will say that there's 4 different kinds of faith. I personally think that it's more accurate to say that faith has 4 separate functions. The first function is the required faith as a component of salvation. For by grace you are saved through faith. The second function is the faith that is what we believe, our code of conduct, it could be synonymous with what we say as our calling or our walk with God, our belief system. 2 Timothy 4:6, Paul says, "For I'm ready to be offered, the time of my departure is at hand, I have fought a good fight, I've finished my course, I have kept the faith." Paul uses that term very, very often. Third function is a faith that heals. Many examples in the Bible of healing being tied to the faith of the one that asks. Jesus, when he healed the blind men, he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith be it unto you." And then there's the faith that moves mountains. Matthew 17:20 says, "And Jesus said unto them," they were asking why they couldn't cast out the demons and heal, "because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you shall say to this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible to you." What do all four of these examples have in common? They require the belief that God is who he says he is, and the trust that God will do what he says he will do. I'd like to repeat that for effect. Faith involves the belief that God is who he says he is, and the trust that he will do what he promises. I personally believe the more that we make that concept a part of our lives, the deeper our faith will be. I'd like to discuss what happens to bring us to a point of this deep belief and trust in God and Christ, and how that affects our relationship with him and our relationship with each other. First, let's get a grasp of what it means to believe, understand what it means to believe. When we were young, we were taught if we see a falling star and we truly believe, we can make a wish and it'll come true. We were taught if we truly believe in the tooth fairy, that we'll have money on our pillow in the morning. We were taught if we truly believe, we'll get our wish when we blow out the candles on our birthday cake. We're taught that believing is something that we do with our minds, and the more strong-willed we are in refusing to let doubt in, the more we'll get what we want. So we end up with this idea that somehow we could magically control the outcomes of our lives by believing. And if we don't get what we want, it's because we didn't believe strong enough. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot to be said for a positive frame of mind. Every aspect of our life can probably be improved by a better positive outlook. In sports, confidence is very important, obviously. In sales, if you're in sales, a positive approach will help your bottom line. Even in this cancer battle, a positive, peaceful mental outlook, it's been shown, helps the body heal. Our minds are in control of our bodies, so why wouldn't that be the case? I'd like for you to turn now to Mark 11:24. I've been through the chemo. I've been through the radiation, had a surgical procedure and 2 major surgeries. Done very well through all of them. Been very blessed with recovery, and I'm back to working, but now they have found some spots that they're concerned about, and I go in a few days for biopsy to find out if they are the cancer return. So a few prayers would be appreciated in that area. But with that being said, let me ask you this. Can I, just by believing it's true, ask and receive immediate, complete healing from God just by believing? If I believe strong enough, can I receive healing? And if I'm not healed right now, is it because I didn't believe strong enough? Or the other direction, can I say to God, you promise that you'll heal me if I believe. Now I'm going to claim that promise because you have to do it because you promised. Well, let's read Mark 11:24. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever you desire, when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you shall have them. That sure sounds like if I believe strong enough, I can have what I want. But I want to back up and I want to read the whole passage. I want to start in verse 20, Mark 11, verse 20. And in the morning, as they passed by, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. Jesus had previously cursed the fig tree because he found leaves and no fruit. Verse 21, and Peter, calling to remembrance, said unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which you cursed is withered away. And Jesus answering said, Have faith in God. Please remember that phrase. For verily I say unto you that whosoever shall say to this mountain, Be thou removed, be thou cast into the sea, shall not doubt in his heart, he shall have whatsoever, shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he has said shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith. Therefore I say unto you, whatsoever things you desire, when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you shall have them. And when you stand praying, forgive, if you have anything against any, that your Father also, which is in heaven, may forgive you your trespasses. Please notice how Jesus began his explanation to Peter. Have faith in God. To understand this passage, you have to frame it with those words. The whole passage is about having faith in God. That's the way Jesus started out. That was his point he was making. If you ask of God, if you don't doubt God, if you have faith in God, if you come to God in prayer and believe that God will provide, you will have what you want. Now, this is all about having faith in God. Okay, now we've talked about believing, and we've also talked about having faith. How are these the same thing? Are they connected? Are they different? Remember, faith is a very big word. I'm not going to read the entire faith chapter of Hebrews 11. We know how it starts. You might turn there if you'd like. Verse 1, it starts, Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And that's been described as the definition of faith. Chapter's full of examples of men and women who lived and acted by faith, the things they experienced and things they accomplished, the things they endured. I would like to read Hebrews 11, verse 6, though. Hebrews 11, verse 6. But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. I see this verse as tying faith and belief together very neatly. Remember what I said earlier, faith involves the belief that God is who he says he is, and the trust that he will do what he says he will do. Or as this verse is worded, you must believe that he is, and believe that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Here's a very important point. Faith is belief in God that God has matured into trusting God. Notice I said God has matured because we don't do it. He does it. Belief is something we do with our minds. We affirm that something is true. We know that God exists. We believe that. We know he created the universe. We believe that. We believe that Jesus is his son, and we believe that he was sacrificed for our sins. Trust, however, happens over time. And it happens in stages. And it requires a heartfelt commitment on our part. We can only trust as much as we are willing to let go of distrust. And we can only let go of distrust as much as we feel it's safe to do so. We can say we trust, we can believe we trust, but deep down true trust only comes when we're certain we won't be let down. God doesn't expect us to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to have perfect trust in God today. He doesn't think we should treat him like the tooth fairy. Back in Ephesians 8, we read already, Ephesians 2, verse 8, it says, For grace you are saved through faith, and that not of yourself, it is a gift of God. Faith is a gift of God. It's part of the fruit of the Spirit, which are gifts of God. It's given to those who ask according to his will, and it's usually given a little bit at a time. We have to remember we can't, by the strength of our will and by our own determination not to doubt, generate more faith within ourselves. We can't have more faith by affirmation. That's belief. Affirming something is belief. Trusting is what we're talking about. Now, belief is a wonderful thing. Belief is very important. Belief is extremely important as a starting point for our communication with God. It opens the door for communication with God. We communicate with God. We believe He exists. We can hear His answer. But when we face difficulties in life, we face a job loss, we face financial difficulties, we face family difficulties or diseases, we cry out for help. Eventually, we make it through the difficulty. Oftentimes, the problems are worked out in ways that we could never have imagined them being worked out. We benefit in ways that we could never have imagined we would benefit going into the problem. And it's obvious, looking back, very often that God orchestrated the whole thing. He didn't cause the problem, but He orchestrated our way through it. Presto. God just gave us a little more faith. That was His gift. This happens over and over in this very unpredictable life we live. And God molds and matures our belief in Him into trust in Him, and an unimaginable trust in Him. Our communication that was opened, the door was opened by belief. Our communication and our study and our prayer through the power of the Spirit helps us to begin to understand how He feels about things, what He thinks are important, and we begin to understand His will. This is God's perfect work in us. This is what's going on right now. Okay, we found out that belief in God is what is important. We've learned that belief is matured into trust by God's hand. And as we see Him work through the rough spots in our life. And we've seen that faith is the assurance that God is who He says He is, and the trust that He will perform His promises in His will and in His way. Now, as this works out, our faith in God and our relationship with God mature and are grown simultaneously. They grow together. One grows with the other. As He is growing our faith in Him, He is improving our relationship with Him. So our Christian walk can actually be called our walk of faith, as Peter calls it quite often. And we also see, because of this, why Peter says, but without faith it is impossible, why Paul says, but without faith it is impossible to please Him. The reason God wants a relationship with us is so that our minds can come in line with His minds. Our will can become His will. Let this mind be in you that was also in Christ Jesus. So, as our relationship with Him improves and grows, our understanding of His will grows. As we put on the new man, as Paul says, our will is replaced by His will. His will lives more and more in us, and our will is less and less. So, with that in mind, suppose I say this prayer: God, please help me be more willing to recognize and be helpful to the needy in the neighborhood. I know from my studies, begun by my belief, that helping the needy is part of His will. It's part of true religion, to help the fatherless and widow and keep yourself unspotted. So I know that's His will. I know He'll answer that prayer. If I pray, please heal me of this cancer, I know that it's His will that eventually I have a perfect body. I don't know when, but I know it's His will that I will be healed. I'm confident of that. In His will and in His way. If I do pray, God, please cause the next set of scans to come back clear and for this cancer to be completely gone from my body forever. There is nothing wrong with me praying that. I think He expects me to pray that. I think He wants me to pray that prayer, and He wants me to repeat that prayer and be persistent in that prayer. But He hasn't let me know yet if that's His will. I believe it's his will that I ask, but he hasn't told me that's his will. Because of that fact, because I don't know that it's his will, I can't have complete trust that that particular prayer will be answered the way I want it to be answered. I can have complete trust and faith that his decision will be perfect regardless of what it is. I know it'll be perfect for me. I know it'll be perfect for my loved ones. I just don't know what the decision will be because he hasn't told me. I can think positively all I want to, but I can't trust that it will happen. The best I can do is have wishful thinking. And the reason is because I'm asking actually my will and maybe or maybe not God's will. Now I can ask for strength through this battle, and I know that'll be answered because I know that's his will. I can ask for peace through this battle. I know that'll be answered because I know that's his will. I can ask for peace for my loved ones. I know that will be answered. And I can even ask that he be glorified in whatever his decision is, and I know that will be answered. Those are all things that he's let me know ahead of time that he's told me is his will. As I said before, as my faith grows, my understanding of his will grows, and my will disappears. So by definition, if I have faith in God, I want God's will to be accomplished instead of my will. I can't have living faith in God without having God's will living in me instead of my will. That's part of faith. I can have a blind wishful thinking. I can be positive, mentally positive, but the deep trust I'm talking about can't be there unless I have his will. That trust is only there as he allows a relationship to be built. And that relationship only happens as he shares his will with me. See why I'm saying that faith is a very big word? And you see why if I have faith in God, which includes a knowledge of his will and a strong desire for his will instead of mine, and I command the mountain to be moved to the sea, I would only make that command if I knew beyond a doubt if he had communicated to me that that's his will. And I would only make that command if I knew that mountain moving was his will. And I could be confident that the mountain would move. Because it's his will. When I started out today, I didn't intend to give a comprehensive, all-encompassing discussion of faith, but I wanted to present it a little differently. It's just a huge subject that we all need to study and understand clearer. I hope I've introduced some ideas that you can study and think about and realize that faith, as a concept in the Bible, includes every aspect of our relationship with our Father and our older brother, and every aspect of our spiritual development. It's a precious gift given to us a little at a time, and it automatically includes a better understanding and a stronger desire for his perfect will to be accomplished in us and in our lives. There's no part of our Christian walk that's unaffected by faith. And without it, it's impossible to please God. And all that's just another way of saying faith is a very big word. Thank you, Clay. Good afternoon, everyone. I had no idea Clay was going to sing that last song. I'm going to spend a lot of this sermon talking about what that last song talks about. Shine, Jesus, shine, the light of the world. I want to start off talking about freedom. Freedom is a concept that's near and dear to us as Christians, as Americans. We live in what has been called the freest society in history. But we seem to see that freedom slipping away. We seem to be witnessing a society that is getting more and more used to the idea, accepting of the idea that we have to sacrifice some of our freedom in exchange for security. Are we really free? I don't want today to talk about politics. I don't want to talk about governments, human governments. I'm not going to talk about Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal. What I am going to discuss, though, is true freedom. The kind of freedom that we can all experience no matter what situation we find ourselves in. No matter who tries to control us. I want to talk about a freedom that imparts a satisfaction and a peace that can only be understood spiritually, cannot be understood physically. There's only one source for the kind of freedom I'm talking about, and it's the one who invented the idea. His word, this book, is focused on freedom. It's about freedom. He is about freedom. His adversary is about control. When you see people trying to control others, no matter what the situation or no matter how noble the cause may be, you can rest assured that Satan's way of thinking is at the center of it. I think at least some of the founding fathers understood this idea and tried to build a nation based on the concept that freedom comes from above. And we've come to expect those in authority, in governmental authority, to rise to the task of ensuring our freedom. But it doesn't come from them. Freedom comes from God. There is no other source. And true freedom was made attainable only through the sacrifice of Jesus. Let me read you some of the thoughts that Christ had about freedom. You can turn to, if you'd like, to John 8:31. I'm reading in the NIV. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, "If you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." They answered him, "We are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free?" Jesus replied, "I tell you